Hello, BookTube. Well, despite the chaos of the outside world, despite the lawlessness that's in the news, one thing is a refreshing constant in our world, and that is the OGBG book haul wars. The old geezers book group hauling books that they need like an extra hole in the head. You have seen that in the field of combat has mostly redounded to simply me and Mark Richardson. Now, in a perfect world, where Frida and I were just occupying a guest room up at Old Stonebuck, Mark and I would be doing these hauls together. but since we're separated by a pandemic, we're doing them apart, and the only casualty is your TBRs. And along those lines, I went back to the Brattle Bookshop this morning. The Brattle Bookshop is a great used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston, jam-packed with books, and with a buying table. The buying table today was stacked. You couldn't see the top of the table. The stacks were eye-high all over the top of a giant table of new acquisitions, with boxes and boxes more coming up all the time. So that buying table is always active. So the stock inside the store changes all the time. Something that you see in the fiction section or the nature section and think, oh, I'll have to come back for that, might very well not be there the next time you come back. And in addition to all that, there's a sale lot right next to the store. Thousands more books for $1, $3, and $5. And that's where I do most of my hunting. I did a great deal of hunting out there this morning, even though it was a bit on the cold side. And I found a bunch of books that I want to show you. The first one being connected to another video that I want to make today. I want to read to you again. I want to do another Steve Reads to You. And I want to do a reading from a book in this series. But this is something that I haven't read in a while. In fact, not since it came out. Oh my. Oh, goodness gracious. This book is upside down. This thing came out in 1998. That's when I read it. I haven't read it again. This is Heartfire by Orson Scott Card, part of the Alvin Maker series that I want to read a bit from the Alvin Maker series, a different book. But this, I haven't read this in 98. That would be 2008, 2018, so over 20 years. I just noticed when I opened this that it's upside down. So let's just fix that so I'm not overly disoriented. This is a fantasy series set in an 18th century America that is very different, where folk magic is very real, hexes and spells and whatnot are very real, and where everybody has a knack of some kind or another. And our main character, Alvin Maker, is a maker with a capital M. He is the sum of all knacks. He can do almost anything. And this is the story of the first three novels are really his coming of age, and then the novels that follow after that are grown-up adventures in a land that is riven by slavery. So by the issue of slavery. So I saw this and thought, I didn't quite remember being all that impressed with it, although there were parts of it that I liked, and that means it's ripe for a reread because it's been a long time. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna give it a reread. And then this next one goes on. I will reread this as well, parts of it anyway. But this is it goes on a shelf that I am slowly building of the collected volumes of Stephen Jay Gould. This is Dinosaur in the Haystack. Stephen Jay Gould forever and ever wrote a regular column, This View of Life, for Natural History Magazine. I don't know if Natural History Magazine is even still in business. I subscribed for the whole time that he had his column, pretty much exclusively for his column, and I imagine I wasn't alone in that. And steadily, while he was doing that column and teaching classes at Harvard and giving lectures and whatnot, he was also collecting these into books. And I read the first two of those, and then the first three of those in cute little white mass market paperbacks that were really, really handy in the hand, but that the binding just broke apart. So then I started to get the hardcovers. And they need to be in order because these are just collections of natural history essays and observations. This is, but I don't have any of my back issues of natural history. I used to keep them. I used to keep a huge, great box of them, only to revisit his columns. So these books were a godsend. And I've had all of these at one point or another. That's what kills me about it. Just a happenstance is that every year I made sure to get the latest Stephen Jay Gould volume and reread it, revisit all of these things, the highs and the lows. Of course, you're doing a monthly column Not everything's going to be a home run, and that's true for Gould as well. But one by one, I got rid of them as well. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I have decided, in 2019, I decided, the stuff that I just genuinely love, I'm just going to get and keep. No matter how many copies there are, no matter how much space it takes up, if I genuinely love Will and Ariel Durant's Story of Mankind, I'm going to get those volumes. Thanks to the good offices of one of you, I have them in electronic format, so I don't need 2 whole shelves to fit them. But that's the sort of thing that I mean. That's the sort of thing that I was mentioning yesterday with not Stephen J. Gould, with Samuel Eliot Morrison's multi-volume history of the operations of the American Navy during World War II. A truly amazing work of history in multiple 20-something volumes. I love those volumes. I love the one volume abridgment that he did, but I also love the individual volumes. And I've just decided, same thing with Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey and Maturin series, just get them all. Just get them all. If you love them, if you love revisiting them, then just get them all. Same thing is true with Stephen Jay Gould. So now I have Hen's Teeth and Horses, Flamingo Smile, Bully for Brontosaurus, Ever Since Darwin, and there are a couple of them, I can't quite see them because a teddy bear is in the way. But now I have this as well. I will reread bits and pieces from here, and then that will go up on my steadily expanding Stephen Jay Gould shelf. Because he is, in terms of popular writer on natural history subjects, archaeology, that sort of thing, he's delightful. If you haven't made his acquaintance, or if you maybe made his acquaintance in the wrong way, which is to read his little book on the millennium, then find one of these big, generous essay collections and read that instead. It's delightful. Absolutely delightful. And I know from experience with those other books on that shelf, the Panda's Thumb and whatnot, I know from experience that the rereading these things doesn't do anything to diminish them. They're every bit as wonderful. So I got that I will dip into it. But this next one was a Dinosaur in a Haystack. It's the thing that I really want, but it's also an indulgence of the Brattle Bookshop itself. The Brattle Bookshop has such an enormous turnaround of the books that come through of all types, in all shapes, at all times. Such an enormous turnaround that you will get a second and a third chance at things. Right? I've lived in a lot of towns that had no used bookstore, that had a really well-intentioned but bad one. Where if I decided that I wanted all the collections of Stephen Jay Gould, I would have to go online and just order them all. There's no way that I could just complacently sit back and expect them to show up at my used bookstore, because they wouldn't. I'd wait forever. Whereas at the Brattle, I know that will happen, and that it will happen fairly expeditiously, so that I won't need to worry about it. That's one of the luxuries of a magic place like the Brattle, or the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut, where someday, in a perfect world, the ultimate booktube entertainment, OGBGYs, would be for all of us. That's Todd Oval at Todd's Bursting Bookcase. That's Sean Standfast over in England. That's Jason Harrigan. And that's me and Mark Richardson, where all 5 of us would get in a car and go to Niantic, Connecticut, to the Book Barn, which is 5 buildings full of used books. And an uncounted number of cats, a dog, a goat, a koi pond, a petting zoo, with great seafood and fast food shops right along the water, a minute away. The quintessential OGBG booktube entertainment would be if we all got in a car and all went there and vlogged that experience. Oh my, I don't know that the Book Barn, it's 5 buildings full of books, but I don't know that they'd have any stock left after we left. It would be like a giant cloud of locusts. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that one of the luxuries of places like that is that they will provide. I always say the Brattle will provide. The turnover and the acquisition is so great that you can sit back and say, it will show up. It will certainly show up. I don't need to take any extra precautions. I don't need to go to another bookstore. I don't need to go online, because this will show up. And then I'll get it. And that is true of this next book as well. That is this great big thing. Peter Ackroyd's gigantic biography of Charles Dickens in hardcover. Very, very good biography. Probably Peter Ackroyd's my favorite thing that he's written. which if you're watching the OGBG Book Haul Wars, you will have seen that Mark Richardson in his, I think, last video, I think the most recent video that he did, where he had a few CDs and a few books, and over his shoulder on one of the bookcases was this book just sitting there. I think that was his last video. I want to say, I almost just said, it was the video where the blood-curdling scream of a small child was cut short by a judicious edit, but then I realized that's every video. That's every video at Old Stuff. If the children are deathly quiet for 12 hours, consumed in video games, then they sound like like some sort of war band. Where you're constantly, I think it's fantastic. One of my favorite parts of being up there is that the background noise of blood-curdling childish screams. So I don't know, that doesn't narrow the field. That could apply to a lot of Mark's videos. But I remember in one video, he moves his location around from time to time where he's filming, and this was sitting on his shelf over there. And some of you may remember that last year I got a trade paperback of this biography. It's a terrific Dickens biography. I'm no great fan of Dickens novels, but this is just biography exactly as it should be, and that isn't a given because Peter Ackroyd is an all-purpose hack and has written his fair share of books that just fall flat. This one doesn't, though. This is just superb. And I found a trade paperback of this last year and reread it. I reread the whole thing over the course of a weekend and made highlights and whatnot, underlining and notes and whatnot. And then I noticed something, that all through the course of the months after that, I was constantly going back to this book. Somebody from the Victorian area crops up. I would go back to that paperback, go to the index and find out what Peter Ackroyd has to say about that person. Or if Dickens comes up, as he often does in other books, in especially reviews, he often does come up, and then I found that I was often wanting to consult this book. And also, I have a little personal habit that when I read a lot of print news, book review journals. And if I read something that I really like, I pull it out, fold it neatly, and then put it in a receptacle book, in whatever book fits the subject. If it's the book under review, so much the better. But if it's not, then something close. And I noticed that I was stuffing that paperback of Ackroyd's Dickens with clippings like that. And realized at some point, well, okay, you resisted this, but you need the hardcover of this book. Not only because it would make a better place for all sorts of ephemera, but also because you really like the book. If you didn't really like the book, you wouldn't be going back to it so often. It's the way every book in our library should be. It should be something that we actively use, not something that sits there as an heirloom. So I said to myself when I realized that, well, what you need to do is keep an eye out at the Brattle for the next time you see it in hardcover. And because the Brattle has the turnover that it does, it's the type of shop where you can say that and expect that it will become true in very little time. And here it is. And I admit there was also an extra element when I grabbed this today of getting a book that I saw in a video by a fellow combatant in the OGBG Haul Wars. It's sort of like a creeping in on their territory. And if that was a creeping in on Mark's territory, then this next one is a full-blown assault on that territory, because this is Evelyn Waugh of the later years by Martin Stannard, which was in Mark's last haul. So the OGBG Haul Wars have now degenerated to a state of barbarism such that we're not just doing a haul to match the other person's haul, but we're trying to match the actually specific books. I have only read this once. I read it when it first came out. When was that? That was, I want to say the 1990s. 1992, yes. I've read the other volume, the early years, is tremendously involving. Just tremendous. The first book, some of you will actually know what it looks like. It's got a green cover and a painting of a very young dandy-esque Evelyn Waugh on the cover. And it covers the hugely dramatic elements of his youth. The affairs, the marriage, the early literary career, the burning of bridges, the firebrand reviews, the travel, the famous travel that made his name, the struggle with the upper classes to be accepted with the church. That first volume in this 2-volume biography reads like something that Waugh would have written himself. It's amazingly done. The second volume has a much greater challenge to it because Waugh pulled in to his own world after the events in that first volume. Stannard is absolutely right to split this in two because it's like two different lives. Waugh pulled increasingly inward in his world, compared himself at one point in a letter to a friend, compared himself to Greta Garbo, who's never seen nor heard. He kept writing, and he kept doing reviews, but he more and more pulled into his marriage, into one little house, one little stately world, where occasionally people would go to visit, but where there was nothing like the Schotten incident of the first volume, which I don't have. Same as Mark. I don't have the first volume here. I should, because Stannard does a fantastic job. Just fantastic. He's read everything. Not just that Waugh has written, but that everyone around him has written. Even in letters, he'll be talking about some period in Waugh's life, and he'll quote something, and you'll be thinking, well, that doesn't come from any of Waugh's novels. What on earth is that from? And he'll say, this is from a letter that so-and-so wrote to so-and-so. Neither one having much to do with Waugh, but I thought the sentiment struck me as similar to what he was going through at this period of his life. And you're thinking, yes, it does, but you're the only person in the world who would know that. Stannard also wrote a great biography of Muriel Spark, just the biography of Muriel Spark. But these two volumes on Evelyn Waugh, I recall them being just virtuoso. And in their course, Waugh had a reputation as being disagreeable, prickly, irascible. And like most people who have that kind of a reputation, it largely wasn't true. He berated himself privately for how unclubbable he was, for how short-tempered he could be with other people. But you don't see it. And the devotion of his friends speaks otherwise. Since there we're told the people that he immediately turned on. I've never seen it myself in any of the stuff that I have heard or watched or read about Waugh. And in these books, I certainly don't see someone curdling from an unclubbable and antisocial youth into a bitter, monstrous old man. I just don't see it. And the amazing thing about these biographies, these two volumes, is that it's not because Stannard is pulling his punches. Waugh was brutally honest in almost everything that he did. Unless he was being paid to lie, he was usually brutally honest. That's, I think, where a lot of that reputation as an irascible curmudgeon comes from. And Stannard pays him the compliment of being brutally honest about him in return. Even in this second volume, even when a biographer with a heart of stone is going to feel sympathetic towards the creature that Waugh is becoming, the pathetic figure that he's becoming, bemoaning poverty and traveling all over the world, and worst of all, and a thing that Stannard never fails to mention, worst of all, in addition to all that, losing his charm with critics, where everything that he comes up with, the critics at first say, well, it's Evelyn Waugh, so it's an amazing major event, and it's beautifully written, but... And as time goes on, all throughout the progress of this book, for instance, as time goes on, that but comes faster, and the things that follow after it are longer and longer, as people find fault with what this great writer was doing, and Stannard is right there. He's not like a lot of biographers where they get into their writer's corner and start saying, no, they misunderstood. No, he said, no, it is a deeply flawed, dumb, shallow work. The critics, if anything, were being gentle. That's amazingly bracing to read. I remember this being just a terrific reading experience. And now, much like Mark, I need to find Volume 1. Now, I don't know. Mark will probably find Volume 1 tomorrow, and he'll hold it up, and he'll show you all the indicia, and then he'll say, hey, it was 50 cents. Mine will not be 50 cents. But I do have a hope that the person who got rid of this at the Brattle also got rid of Volume 1. Stands to reason that a person who has Volume 2 probably had Volume 1. And that the circumstances that would cause them to get rid of one might cause them to get rid of both. Which means that Volume number 1 could show up. It could show up at the Brattle sometime soon. I'm hoping that I'm there to see it. And then we'll finish this out with two wonderful books. Oversized, but still wonderful books. They're bird books. I love me bird books. I know you've heard Olive at a book Olive say she wants all the bird books. And I'm not sure that I'm quite that bad, but these were just too pretty to pass up. This first one is Wings Upon the Heavens, a portraits of inspiration and warmth from the fascinating world of birds. I'm going to have to clean up this cover. This will be possible. I will be able to get all of that stuff off without hurting the cover. This is from, Christmas 1978. Is that when this book came out? Or did you get somebody an old thing? Christmas 1978. This come out in 78? Did you come out in 78? No. No, this came out in 76. Okay, well, anyway. This is just passages with illustrations. So here we have Martin. There's a great heron. Just beautiful illustrations all throughout with little passages about the bird in question. I love this sort of thing. I can never get enough of it. So I was happy to see it. And not only did I see that, but I saw another thing just like it. This is John Kieran. This is an introduction to birds. Same thing, an oversized guide to birds. This one with, I believe, different artwork. Yeah, there you go. That'll have. This is starling. I thought I'm not cursed enough to open this directly to the English house sparrow. No, there my hoi polloi. I have those of you who may be new to the channel, I have a rather unruly crowd of that particular bird right outside and living in the hedges. But that's what this is. This is more of a bird guide, not anything technical, but still, and lovely. Just the lovely thing, both of them, just lovely bird books. John Kieran married a wonderful Massachusetts woman and spent some time in Massachusetts, and had a wonderful style. I know that these two things probably come together at the Brattle. Two bird books probably came to the Brattle from the same person. I noticed a lot of other bird books there, and that's unfortunate because that means that'll be the only John Kieran book that this person, whoever sold these to the Brattle, was interested in. So I won't get any of his other books, and what I wouldn't give to have his other books, even the sports writing books. He was such a good writer. Totally gone now. That I would love it if this betokened all of his works, including he did a biography. He did an autobiography late in life, not as late as this. I think this was his last book. But he did an autobiography, I think called Not Sworn In, Not Under Oath, something like that. I remember reading chunks of that at a library and really liking it. I never even read the whole thing. But I doubt that's to be. I think it's more likely that all the bird stuff will come up. Be on board for that as well. But anyway, that was my latest installment in the OGBG Ongoing Hostilities, where in this particular case, I didn't just score a hit with the hardcover of Ackroyd's Life of Dickens, but I actually picked off one of the general's sons by getting the same book, Evelyn Waugh, The Later Years, by Martin Starner. Who knows what the response will be from the thick woods of Vermont. But anyway, we have an introduction to birds and Wings Upon the Heavens. Two books, two big thin picture books on the splendor of birds, which are going to go right in here. They're going to go right on this shelf here. No doubt about it at all. I'll clean them up, I'll enjoy them, I'll love them, and then they'll come in here. And then we have Evelyn Waugh, The Later Years. Oh, you don't have a copy? Well, all the best people do. And then the hardcover of Peter Ackroyd's Charles Dickens biography. But for the most pure reason you could buy a used book, because I know that I'm using it. I know that it is a workhorse in the library, so I need a hardcover. Then Dinosaur in a Haystack. I will reread bits of this, and it'll go up on the Gould Memorial shelf. And Heartfire, one of the books in the Tales of Alvin Maker, and one of the ones that I haven't read in quite some time. So that's going to be a thrill. I'm bound to be stuff that I've forgotten. So there you go. There's a used book haul for you. There will be, and I want to stress this, no matter what happens from the woods of Vermont, there will be no used book haul tomorrow. None. It's going to have to wait. But in the meantime, there'll be plenty of other stuff to do. We'll find all sorts of things to talk about. Thank you very much, as always, for your company, BookTube. I'll see you soon.